Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, December 29th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. Expect a mild day in Riverside with a high of 68.5 degrees and a low dipping to 53.0, so layers might be your best friend as the evening cools off. Coming up, we'll break down the reasons behind President Trump's move to pause key offshore wind initiatives along the East Coast and revisit the thrilling NFC showdown where the San Francisco 49ers edged out the Chicago Bears in a high-scoring battle, keeping their playoff hopes alive. Plus, we'll cover other top stories from around the world, including updates on global markets and local impacts. All this and more on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning. A major shakeup for offshore wind along the East Coast this week, with 5 big projects suddenly on hold. Ethan, bring us up to speed on what changed and why.
Good morning, Grace. The Interior Department, led by Secretary Doug Burgum, paused leases and issued 90-day stop work orders for 5 advanced offshore wind projects, and they did it on December 22, just a week before Christmas. The administration says there are emerging national security risks, especially radar interference from the massive turbines that could hide low-flying drones or vessels. According to ABC News and the New York Times, this marks a sharp break from the Biden years, when these same projects cleared Pentagon reviews and received green lights under the Inflation Reduction Act.
So the White House is making this about defense. What exactly are they saying is at risk?
The argument is that the turbines throw off radar clutter, which can create false returns, raise detection thresholds, and mask real targets near busy coastal corridors. Secretary Burgum has leaned on classified analyses from the rebranded Department of War, saying adversaries have evolved tactics like drone swarms since the earlier approvals. The Washington Post notes the administration ties this to broader security concerns around military training routes, Coast Guard rescues, and aviation safety. He has also said, quote, "We cannot allow our defenses to be blinded by rushed builds," end quote, echoing themes you can hear on Fox Business and in coverage syndicated by AOL.
How big are the projects getting hit here?
They are among the largest in the country, together expected to power up to 2 million homes and support tens of thousands of union jobs, according to CNN and the New York Times. Vineyard Wind off Massachusetts is the marquee project, roughly half built, and was set to be the first large-scale American offshore wind farm. You also have Revolution Wind for Rhode Island and Connecticut, Sunrise and Empire Wind off New York, and Dominion Energy's Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind, which is the biggest of the bunch at about 2.6 gigawatts. These all had either construction underway or final permits in hand when the stop work orders landed.
Let's take Vineyard Wind first. What's the status and why does it matter?
Vineyard Wind 1 is that 800-megawatt array off Massachusetts, with 62 turbines that rival skyscrapers in height. It had a mitigation deal with the Pentagon's Sighting Clearinghouse dating back to March of 2022 to protect a local surveillance radar near Falmouth. NPR and the New York Times reported it was roughly mid-construction, with the final turbine installations lined up to bring power to about 400,000 homes. The pause threatens to push those deliveries well past next year, raising costs and potentially forcing penalties under supply contracts.
And Revolution Wind, the Rhode Island and Connecticut project, where did that stand before this pause?
Revolution Wind was roughly 80% complete and expected to deliver electricity early next year, according to CNN's reporting on statements from Connecticut officials. The Pentagon had given a no objection with provisions letter in December of last year after mitigation agreements in November, which meant the military believed it could live with the radar impacts. There was already a legal fight in September, where a federal judge reinstated work after a prior halt, so this latest suspension revives that fight at an even tenser moment. Connecticut's governor warned that every week idle boosts costs for ratepayers and jeopardizes public-private investments that took years to assemble.
What about New York's projects, Sunrise and Empire Wind?
Sunrise Wind, a joint effort between Ørsted and Eversource, had completed permitting in 2024 and coordinated with the Pentagon on siting, as the New York Times noted when it cleared key hurdles. It was primed to serve hundreds of thousands of homes in a grid that is already straining under rapid growth in data centers and electrification, a point The Guardian and industry analysts have made for months. Empire Wind 1, led by Equinor, was over 60% complete after a construction and operations plan approval last February, revised in December. Federal documents required communication protocols with Navy commands and careful distance from bases like Naval Weapons Station Earl, but all of that is now in limbo, while lawyers and agencies sift through the new security claims.
And Virginia's huge project, CVOW, that seems like the biggest economic hit. What's happening there?
Coastal Virginia Offshore Wind is Dominion's flagship, with 176 turbines planned and a capacity that dwarfs the others. It had a record of decision in late 2023 and final plan approval last January, including a radar impact agreement with NORAD, worth about $160,000 to manage interference. The Washington Post and Virginia Business report it is bleeding more than $5 million a day in vessel idling and contractual costs, while crews stand down. Dominion says the halt could ripple through Hampton Roads shipyards and logistics hubs and even touch grid reliability for Virginia's dense cluster of military bases and data infrastructure.
The administration says these risks are new or newly urgent. Is there evidence to back that up?
There is some, and it is mixed. A Government Accountability Office report from April of this year flagged gaps in interiors oversight and warned that turbine reflectivity and blade motion can degrade radar performance, a point CBS News also covered. The Energy Department's Wind and Radar Mitigation Team has said software filters help, but cannot fully restore radar sensitivity, especially against small, low-altitude targets like drones. Historically, there were documented conflicts, like projects near Travis Air Force Base in the mid-2000s and cancellations a few years later in the Midwest, which critics point to as examples that the risks are real if poorly mitigated.
But under President Biden, these projects got Pentagon sign-offs. What changed between then and now?
That is the crux. During the Biden years, the Defense Department's clearinghouse issued no objection letters with conditions after lengthy interagency reviews, and the FAA and the Coast Guard did their own checks, as PBS and The Guardian reported at the time. The Trump team says adversaries, drones, electronic warfare, and targeting have evolved since late 2024, so prior mitigations are obsolete or inadequate. They argue a precautionary pause is warranted, but states and developers counter that classified claims cannot retroactively nullify years of negotiated risk management without a lawful process.
Speaking of process, what's the legal path the administration took, and how solid is it?
After an early executive order in January halted new leasing and got struck down in federal court this month as arbitrary, Interior shifted tactics. According to the New York Times, they're using lease-level pauses framed as national security reviews, executed through a director's order on December 22. That looks more targeted and could be harder to overturn, but it still has to clear administrative law standards for reasoned decision-making. Judges will likely press the government to justify the timing, the scope, and the reliance on classified evidence that parties cannot fully contest.
We know states are furious. What are governors and lawmakers saying?
Governors from Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, and Rhode Island sent a joint letter on December 26 demanding a classified briefing and calling the security rationale a pretext to favor fossil fuels. CT Mirror and Rhode Island outlets reported they fear job losses and higher bills if projects stall through winter. New York leaders, including Governor Kathy Hochul and Mayor Eric Adams, warned the halt undermines clean energy targets and construction careers in ports from Brooklyn to Albany, as AOL's reporting recounted. In Virginia, bipartisan lawmakers protested a related funding cut for a Norfolk logistics hub that was supposed to serve the offshore supply chain.
What about Republicans who support the pause?
Representative Chris Smith from New Jersey has been one of the loudest voices, cited by the New York Post and AOL, warning that large turbine arrays could blind coastal defense radars and recalling nearby World War II sites that pioneered detection. Secretary Burgum and allies frame offshore wind as expensive, intermittent, and overly subsidized compared with gas pipelines that they argue deliver steadier energy. They also point to a Newark radar outage earlier this year as a cautionary example of how fragile surveillance can be, though critics say that incident was not caused by turbines. Supporters of the pause emphasize that you cannot compromise national defense for industrial policy, even a green one.
Let's turn to the court fight. There's a key hearing in Virginia today, right?
There is. Dominion sued on December 23 in the Eastern District of Virginia, asking Judge Jamar Walker for a temporary restraining order to lift the 90-day stop on coastal Virginia offshore wind. The hearing is scheduled for this afternoon in Norfolk, and as of this morning, there is no ruling yet. Local coverage from 13 News Now and docket watchers at Pacer say the judge will likely question how much of the government's evidence must be shown in open court versus behind closed doors due to classification.
Could a win there help the other projects, or is each case different?
A win would not automatically restart the others, but it could set a template. If the court finds the pause procedurally deficient, say for failing to weigh reliance interests or failing to explain departures from prior Pentagon clearances, developers in New York and New England could cite that reasoning. Ørsted, which already won an injunction in September for Revolution Wind, is weighing options according to Renewable Now and the New Bedford Light. Equinor is complying for now while evaluating challenges for Empire Wind, and Massachusetts officials are coordinating with their attorney general on potential suits.
Let's talk dollars and jobs. How big is the economic disruption if these pauses stretch beyond 90 days?
It compounds quickly. The industry warns about demobilizing specialized vessels that are booked years in advance, cancellation clauses that kick in after prolonged delays, and workers who scatter if projects stall through a season. Canary Media and Offshore Wind Biz have reported developers facing hundreds of millions in exposure on a single project if schedules slip past contracted windows for trenching, cable laying, or weather-limited turbine installation. Governors say thousands of union jobs are at risk, and utilities warn that replacing this expected supply with gas in the short term could raise rates, particularly in Connecticut and New York.
The administration counters that taxpayers are carrying too much of the cost. Is that accurate?
It depends on how you count. Republicans point to tax credits under the Inflation Reduction Act and other incentives that could add up to hundreds of billions over a decade, with Representative Smith suggesting taxpayers cover around 1/3 of overall costs, as reported by the New York Post. Supporters of the project cite analyses in Utility Dive and NPR showing that once built offshore wind can hedge against volatile fuel prices and lower emissions costs borne by health systems and communities. They also note that Europe has operated tens of gigawatts of offshore wind near sensitive coastlines with negotiated mitigations, suggesting the security risks can be managed rather than scrapping projects outright.
On that point, are there proven technical fixes for the radar interference?
There are partial ones. The Energy Department's radar mitigation effort has tested signal processing upgrades, infill radars to cover blind spots, and strategic gaps in turbine arrays to preserve sightlines for specific corridors. According to DOE updates and coverage summarized in the Los Angeles Times, these steps improve performance but may not fully restore baseline detection, especially for the smallest, slowest targets. That is why the debate is so fraught. The science says you can reduce risk, but the residual risk becomes a policy judgment about what is acceptable near crowded sea lanes and military training routes.
If these pauses become extensions, could any of the projects be canceled?
Yes, that is a real possibility. Developers have financing timelines, credit agreements, and supply chains calibrated to specific milestone dates, and prolonged uncertainty can break those apart. According to the Washington Post and CBS News, some contracts carry escalating penalties or give counterparties exit options if progress stops, and insurers may balk at repeated stop-and-go cycles. If Interior keeps renewing the 90-day orders without a clear path to mitigations, one or more projects could become uneconomic on current terms.
What does this mean for the broader energy mix on the East Coast heading into next year?
Analysts at Brookings and committee staff on House.gov warn that the region is walking a tightrope as electrification surges and data center load soars. If offshore wind slips, utilities may lean more on gas-fired plants and imports, which could meet demand but complicate climate targets and price stability. Nuclear units are steady but cannot be built quickly, and onshore renewables often face their own siting fights. So in the near term, the pause nudges the grid toward more fossil generation, just as winter peaks and next summer's cooling demand loom.
The politics feel unavoidable here. How much of this is policy versus politics?
It is both. On policy, the administration is recentering fossil fuels under an America First banner and recasting national security as a gating factor for renewable build-out. On politics, the Washington Post frames the move as part of a broader campaign promise to punish what the president has called the, quote, scam of the century, end quote, referring to green subsidies. The lawsuits now become the referee, deciding whether that policy pivot is executed lawfully or gets reined in for cutting corners.
Last thing, Ethan, what should listeners watch for today and this week?
First, the Norfolk hearing. If Judge Walker grants the temporary restraining order, Dominion could restart critical maritime work windows, and that would embolden other developers to rush into court. Second, keep an eye out for a governor's briefing. If Interior agrees to a classified update, it might temper some rhetoric or, conversely, sharpen legal claims depending on what they hear. And third, watch whether Interior signals specific mitigations and timelines rather than open-ended reviews. Clarity on requirements like infill radar or corridor redesigns could be the difference between a managed delay and a project tipping into cancellation.
A lot at stake for the grid, the economy, and national security. Ethan, thanks for breaking it down.
Thanks, Grace.
The Niners and Bears put on a wild one last night. Chloe, walk us through how San Francisco pulled out that 42-38 win.
It started as badly as it could for the Niners, then turned into a track meet. According to NBC Bay Area's recap, which drew heavily from Associated Press reporter Josh Dubow, Brock Purdy's first pass was tipped and picked by TJ Edwards, who returned it 34 yards for a touchdown just 15 seconds in. CBS News, via KPIX in San Francisco, called it a high-scoring thriller, but both outlets noted San Francisco settled down fast and matched Chicago's score for score.
That opening shocker could rattle anyone. How rare was a pick six on the first snap?
The Elias Sports Bureau told NBC Bay Area and CBS it was the Bears' first defensive touchdown on an opening play in at least 45 years. Fox Sports, aggregation on the team sites, underscored the improbability it set a chaotic tone, yet it didn't faze Purdy for long. He answered with a 65-yard march capped by a 1-yard flip to tight end Jake Tunges, who was in for the injured George Kittle.
So then it turned into a shootout. What defined the first half?
Points, big plays, and a lot of pace. The San Francisco Chronicle reported the Niners built a 28-21 halftime lead, with Purdy adding 2 rushing touchdowns, while Christian McCaffrey pounded out 140 rushing yards and a score, and caught enough passes to set the franchise single-season receptions record for a running back at 96. Marquee Sports Network highlighted Chicago rookie Caleb Williams firing deep to Luther Burden III, who finished with 8 grabs for 138 and a touchdown.
We heard something quirky about the score progression. What was the odd history note?
WSLS 10 in Virginia flagged that it was the first NFL game where the score was tied at every 7-point interval: 7-7, 14-14, 21-21, 28-28, and 35-35. The back and forth felt almost scripted, with neither side getting separation until the final minutes. CBS News echoed that description, saying the offenses owned the early stretches before the defenses made just enough stands at the end.
Keep us in the second half. How did both teams keep piling it on?
They traded touchdowns on their first 3 drives after halftime to hit that 35-35 knot. Chicago leaned on DeAndre Swift, who punched in 2 rushing scores and, as Fox Sports noted, briefly flipped momentum to the Bears. Then came the play everyone's replaying from the 6. Purdy rolled right, evaded rushers for more than 8 seconds, and lofted a touchdown to Kyle Juszczyk, a moment that the AP quoted Kyle Shanahan as saying, quote, "made me nervous," end quote, before praising it as a team win.
Chicago still got the lead late, right?
They did. After forcing a Niners punt, The Bears drove, but stalled in the red zone, and settled for a 29-yard Kairos Santos field goal with 5 minutes and 22 seconds left, as detailed by Fox News and KSL.com's play-by-play. That gave them a 38-35 edge and set up Purdy for one more answer.
And that answer was?
A dagger to Juwan Jennings. With just over 2 minutes left, Purdy hit Jennings for a 38-yard touchdown to make it 42-38, a throw CBS News and WSLS 10 said showcased his poise as much as his arm. The Bears, whom NBCSports.com has dubbed the Cardiac Bears this season, weren't done and surged down to the 2 with 4 seconds remaining.
What happened on that final snap?
San Francisco's midseason pickup Bryce Huff pressured Williams off his spot, forcing a rush throw that skipped short of Ja'Day Walker in the end zone. NBC Bay Area and WSLS 10 credited the defensive stand, and Purdy called it a, quote, cool team win, end quote, a phrase you also saw echoed on the team's site. It was one of the rare late drives this season where Williams didn't complete the comeback.
Speaking of Williams, how did the rookie look overall?
He looked like a franchise quarterback on the road in prime time, even in defeat. ChicagoBears.com and Marquee Sports Network reported he went 25 of 42 for 330 yards and 2 touchdowns, including one to tight end Colston Loveland, and drove them 63 yards in the final minute before the miss. Still, SportsMockery.com noted he was frustrated afterward about the missed shot at the number 1 seed.
And Purdy's stat line keeps getting gaudier. What club did he just join?
A select one. According to AP stats cited by CBS Sports HQ and Yahoo Sports, Purdy became just the 6th player since the merger to record back-to-back games with at least 5 total touchdowns. He finished 24 of 33 for 303 yards and 3 passing scores, plus 2 on the ground, after throwing a career-high 5 touchdown passes the previous week against Indianapolis.
McCaffrey's record caught my ear. What exactly did he break?
The Chronicle and the Sacramento Bee said he set the Niners' single-season receptions mark for a running back at 96, passing the old team standard with his catches last night. He also stacked 140 rushing yards and 41 receiving, giving San Francisco balance while George Kittle sat. That dual-threat production is part of why, as NPR's AP feed noted, the Niners can adapt to different game scripts.
Let's zoom out. What does this mean for seeding and the path ahead?
It keeps the number 1 seed squarely within reach. NPR and ABC affiliates like KSLA reported that if the Niners win their regular season finale this Saturday, January 3, 2026, at Levi's, they clinch the NFC West and the top seed because of their head-to-head tiebreaker over Seattle after a 17-13 win earlier. That would set them up for a first-round bye and home field advantage through the conference playoffs, including a potential Super Bowl 60 at their stadium on Sunday, February 8, 2026.
And for Chicago, what's left to play for?
They've already wrapped up their first NFC North crown since 2018 after Green Bay lost to Baltimore, as the AP's NFL Hub and Ground.News aggregated. The number 1 seed is gone, but they can lock in the number 2 slot with a win over Detroit at home on Sunday, January 4, 2026, which is 6 days from today. The New York Times AP write-up framed it as crucial for keeping at least 2 playoff games in Chicago.
We're talking today, Monday, December 29th. Any injury updates?
Yes, and they're significant. The Chronicle, The Washington Post, and 49ers Web Zone reported that All-Pro left tackle Trent Williams strained his right hamstring while chasing Edwards on the pick 6 and didn't return after halftime. He was listed as did not participate on today's estimated practice report. Kyle Shanahan said Williams told him he had, quote, never pulled a hamstring before, end quote, which checks out when you scan RotoWire and his prior injury logs.
So is he out for this coming Saturday?
Shanahan called it a very difficult turnaround, and typical hamstring timelines run 1 to 3 weeks, as the Chronicle noted. That makes him a long shot for the Week 18 meeting with Seattle 5 days from now. Austin Pleasance filled in capably last night, but the Post pointed out he'll see a different level of pressure from Seattle's edge rushers.
What about George Kittle's ankle?
Kittle sat with what Shanahan has described as a low to mid ankle sprain from the Colts game a week ago, and he couldn't go despite testing before kickoff. Today he was upgraded to limited, and Shanahan told reporters he's, quote, moving in the right direction, end quote. With optimism, he's highly likely for Saturday. The Chronicle added that his blocking is nearly as vital as his receiving if Trent Williams can't play.
Any other health notes from the game?
San Francisco listed cornerback Upton Stout with a concussion in the second half, according to the 49ers web zone. On Chicago's side, NBC's coverage and team reports noted linebacker Noah Sewell left with an ankle injury. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka entered concussion protocol, and Olamide Zaccheaus was a scratch due to illness. Those are all situations to monitor with short rest this week.
You mentioned the short week. How big is that factor?
It's real. The Chronicle and Prize Picks analysis both emphasize the Niners are on a short week, going from Sunday night to a Saturday primetime finale, which can tighten recovery windows and prep time, especially with soft tissue injuries. It also means more walkthroughs and fewer full-speed reps for a line that may be reshuffled.
Let's circle back to that bizarre scoring rhythm. Did defenses make any late-statement plays beyond the final snap?
They did, and those were the difference. CBS News pointed to a late Chicago stop that forced a Niners punt and then to San Francisco's red zone stand that held the Bears to 3 instead of 7 with 5 minutes left. And, of course, Bryce Huff's closing pressure, which NBC Bay Area spotlighted, flipped the final play from a possible walk-off to an incompletion.
How did the locker rooms frame the stakes after the game?
Shanahan leaned into the home field carrot, telling reporters, quote, we've earned this. We have an opportunity to never leave here again this year, end quote. A line the Chronicle and WSLS 10 both ran with. Purdy kept the focus on balance and depth, telling AP it was a, quote, team win, end quote. On the other side, Williams' tone, as ChicagoBears.com captured, was measured but disappointed, acknowledging the chance they let slip while noting the bigger goal is still in front of them.
Any advanced or quirky numbers that stuck out?
Beyond the 7-point ties, the sheer efficiency was striking. 80 combined points and 4 lead changes in the second half, as aggregated by Fox Sports. AP Stats noted Purdy's back-to-back 5-plus touchdown games club, and the Sacramento Bee underlined McCaffrey's 96 catches for the season, moving him into rare air for the position. Also, TSN.ca and NBCSports.com have been tracking Chicago's record of 6 late comebacks this year. Last night was poised to be 7 until the final snap.
What should fans watch for this week as the Niners prep for Seattle?
Monitor Trent Williams' participation report and any hints at lineup shuffling, because protecting Purdy is priority 1 against a pass rush that can win on the edge. Keep an eye on Kittle's ankle tolerance through the week. If he's truly trending up, the play action and run blocking both get a lift. NPR's AP feed framed Saturday as a win-and-host scenario, which adds urgency to every health decision.
And for Chicago heading toward Detroit?
Red zone execution will be the drumbeat. Last Word on Sports pointed out that opting for the late field goal and a couple of earlier stalls were the quiet difference between a signature road win and the narrow loss. With seeding still in place 6 days from today, the Bears' margins remain razor thin.
One last thought on the Super Bowl angle. Because Levi's could host it, how much are the Niners talking about that?
Publicly, just enough to acknowledge it without jinxing it. ABC News and The Times, AP pages both emphasized that securing the number 1 seed would keep every NFC game at Levi's, which in turn sets up the possibility of playing Super Bowl 60 at home on Sunday, February 8, 2026. Shanahan's, quote, never leave here again, end quote, line said the quiet part out loud. They want the road to run through Santa Clara.
Chloe, great breakdown of a wild night and an even wilder playoff race. Thanks for walking us through it.
Always a pleasure, Grace. We'll keep tracking injuries and the tiebreakers right through Saturday.
Here are some other headlines. Washington trims its aid sales. The State Department pledges $2 billion for UN relief, a far cry from past crests near $17 billion. The directive to agencies to adapt, shrink, or die signals a humanitarian reset that tacks assistance to U.S. policy and consolidates. At home, funding whiplash and expiring pandemic protections have anti-poverty groups cutting services and staff. Globally, the UN halves its 2026 appeal to $23 billion as donors redirect toward defense, risking nearly 200 million people going without especially food and refugee support in Sudan, Gaza, and sub-Saharan Africa. In Mexico, a project meant to connect commerce came off the rails. An interoceanic train with 241 passengers and 9 crew derailed near Nizanda, Oaxaca, on Sunday, killing at least 13. President Claudia Sheinbaum and the Navy, which runs the line, report 98 injured, 36 hospitalized, 5 critical. The train left the track on a curve, tilting cars beside a steep slope. The Navy deployed 360 responders and ambulances. Prosecutors opened an investigation. The crash dents a flagship corridor, inaugurated in 2023, to rival the Panama Canal, raising questions about safety, maintenance, and investor confidence. Brakes for a line built to speed growth. Kosovo's snap vote put wind at Vetëvendosje's back. Caretaker Prime Minister Albin Kurti's party leads with about 49.6 to 50.8%. The PDK trails near 21%, the LDK around 14%, on turnout near 45%, slightly above February's inconclusive result that idled government for 10 months. The win could unstick the 2026 budget and unlock hundreds of millions in EU growth funds. Kurti calls it the biggest victory in the history of the country. But 61 seats is the switchgear. VV may still need minority partners. The new assembly must steady the economy and prepare to elect a president before Vjosa Osmani's mandate ends in April 2026. In northwest Turkey, a pre-dawn raid turned into a firefight. Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya says 3 police officers and 6 Islamic State militants were killed in El Mali Yalova during a 2 a.m. assault on a hideout. The suspects were Turkish nationals. Special forces from Bursa joined. At least 8 other officers and a night guard were hurt with non-life-threatening injuries. 5 women and 6 children were evacuated, and the op ended by 9:40 a.m. The clash came amid 100-plus raids across 15 provinces to foil alleged holiday plots. President Erdogan vows a comprehensive no-compromise campaign. Expect tighter checks through year's end. And wheels up for scrutiny. An OCCRP probe, aired on NPR, finds traffickers prize U.S. N-number private jets, passports with wings, thanks to lighter foreign scrutiny and registry blind spots. Non-citizens can mask ownership via shell companies or trusts. One California broker ties to 11 aircraft seized since 2014. The FAA registry doesn't require buyer background checks, inviting high flyers and higher risks. Expect legislative headwinds as the administration escalates its war on cartels under Operation Southern Spear, and stakeholders, FAA, justice, and brokers, face calls to ground the loopholes before the next flight plan turns into a flight risk. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with GPT-5, Gemini Pro 3, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.